Tēnā koutou e te iwi wānu I nau mai oki mai ki te ore pūnanga kōrero ki te wā pārikarika. I oi anō rā matariki manawatia matariki ko puanga kaira ka rewa I te pai he hokinga mahara kia haere wakamua. Koia tēnā and with me I have this wonderful man who we often talk to here at Te Korimako o Taranaki, not just myself, but also Te Korimako o Taranaki. But on behalf of Te Korimako o Taranaki, Haydon nau mai haramai ki Te Korimako, e ngā mihi ki a koe.
Ngā mihi, Diane.
Kia ora rā, kia ora rā. You know, when I spoke to Tipani about having this interview with me, he said to me, well, you know, you've got to talk to him about his years in Tui Ora. So you've been there on 25 years at Tui Ora. You've seen the ups and downs with Māori health here in Taranaki. You know, those so much mahi, so much work that you've done. Tell us a little bit about that, background about that. I can't ask you to go back 25 years or we'll be here all day, but let's have a talk about that, Haydon. Tēnā koe.
Look, before, I'm always reminded of that, our whananga, our tupuna and that mihi and waiho mā te tangata e mihi. So it's always tricky to traverse when you start talking about yourself, those, with that, acknowledging that perspective. So, but 25 years will be next by the time I leave, which will be in the early part of next year. It's been it wouldn't be a surprise, you know, for many, and it's been something that we've been talking about in the organisation and particularly with the board for the last little while. So it was really just trying to determine the right time to hop off. And in the discussions with the board is that they will advertise for a new CEO position starting next month, with the aim of an appointment in place by the end of, or a name at least, by the end of this year, and then a little bit of time for a handover before I step away. I'm not stepping out of work. Probably the best way to describe it would be is downsizing. So I'll still be involved in some way or another, but not obviously within Tui Ora. So 25 years ago, look, I can remember it was like yesterday. 4 of us, cardboard boxes and computers. I'm sitting on cardboard boxes, small office, and Marama Oti and was part of the team back then. So just remembering those people that have passed on since that were in those early days. Of course, Dr. Tony Ruakere, of course, and Lindsay McLeod again, all very early people in the involvement in the growth and evolution of Tui Ora. And they're just acknowledging them, and Ta Ross as well. Very much at the founding part of the Tui Ora story. Look, there's many ways I could probably cut and slice this last 25 years, but I would say that in that time, Tui Ora is a very different organisation to what it was back then. And I would look back and say there were probably 4 different types of Tui Ora over the 24, 25 years. So they haven't been the same kind of business model, health model. We were very much grounded, although our focus was in terms of trying to address the inequities for Māori. Sadly, some of those inequities are still entrenched. But we were very much driven by a health system that had a very strong mainstream view. And so trying to adopt a kaupapa way, we try to find a way for that to happen. We're getting closer and closer to what that ideal could look like. We're hopeful that the health reforms will let us go that much further. Certainly when water came on, the whānau water perspective came into being, we embraced it 100%. And we've been on that whānau water journey in spite of what the system still wants us to do and report and behave in a particular way. So one of the challenges for Tui Ora has been to work within a system, and a system that is risk averse, and a system that's got a kind of one shoe fits all approach, and how do we a way that works for whānau. We've said to our kaimahi, we say to them regularly, you know, the contract might say this is why we're here, but actually what's right for the whānau, you know, don't be bound by those parameters sometimes and the constraints the system puts on to you. So that's been a frustration, a challenge, and we've also had breakthroughs along the way. So yeah, that's probably a nice way to describe it. I feel like, half of my life, working life, will have been with Tui Ora. So it's like being part of the family, and in families you have your ups and your downs, and you
Kia
have your
ora.
good times. And I'll have all of those reflections to remember by the time I step away from the organisation. But I'm feeling that it's a good decision for everyone. It's a good decision for me and my whānau. It's a good decision for me and my surfboard. It's a good decision for Tui Ora, fresh blood and fresh thinking coming in and into the leadership part of the organisation. So it's good for everyone. I feel it feels right.
No reira, I just want to quote that it's a good time for you to hand over the reins to someone else. And I go back to that wakatauki kōrero, ka pū te ruha ka hao te rangatahi. Koia tēnā. And he mana tō te kupu, ne? He mana tō te kupu. So as you talked about what you said about reflecting back on those that have passed on now, who were a huge input into how Tui Ora was going to look like today. Also, you talked about the health reforms and how that's affecting the health system, the Māori health system. Let's talk about that.
Yes, so look, I think the health reforms were necessary. I think DHBs had come to their time. They always struggled because of, to a certain degree, scale. And, I was there at the beginning of the DHB story back in the day, the role with Taranaki District Health Board. But I think over time they struggled with the ability to be able to develop the primary care and the community care and the kaupapa Māori capacity, which was greatly needed to try and avoid people needing to go into hospital. And if I can use that as a simple example, they struggled because the hospital demands were greater than they had the ability to be able to make a difference. So the move to, at that particular time when we're talking just over 20 years ago when DHBs came in, it was about being connected to communities and it was about local decision making. The challenge has been, of course, that they didn't have the flexibility locally to be able to act in that particular way. So have struggled to be able to build up these areas where we know where services based in communities are going to get closer to the people who most need them and able to provide the resources. And we saw through COVID-19 what's possible when you let the reins loose and you allow organisations, kaupapa organisations like Ngāti Rauanui, Ngā Ruahine and ourselves to be able to get those resources out to our whānau. So, the timing for the reforms felt absolutely right. The co-governance arrangement, although it's not being described as that, but has the potential. I would characterise the reforms as having potential to make an impact because there's still some ways to go in terms of the implementation. The idea of having a Māori health authority has got the potential to be a game changer. So it will be good to see how that actually plays itself out around the national planning and the national commissioning of services, or the way that governments go around buying services. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays itself out. Then, of course, we're within the region of Te Manawataki. So that's Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Tairawhiti ourselves, Pūwhare Toa. So that's a regional structure of the new reforms, and it'll be it'll be interesting to see how those structural arrangements work. So that we've still got to understand that. And then, of course, what's going to be the most critical thing in my mind is how do we look at the local level? And we've got Te Wharepūnanga Kōrero, who have been signed on as the Iwi Māori Partnership Board. So each area will have some form of local governance. So Te Wharepūnanga Kōrero is that arrangement, and it will be important for us to understand how we want to shape how that arrangement works going forward. So part of the work that Tui Ora undertook last year was to look at our own strategic direction and how we could align to be more moving in the direction of the health reforms. So my task in my final months with Tui Ora is to put some foundations in for Tui Ora to be in a position to work alongside the likes of Te Kawa, Maro, Te Wharepuna, and position ourselves for what that future might look like. So I say it's got the potential. We've got to go about getting the right structures in place and hopefully getting the right decision-making and planning processes in place so that we can actually start building and doing a greater justice and service to our whānau.
Ka pai. So for those that are using the services at the moment now, is it going to be a huge change, or what's that going to do for them?
Yeah,
for the
so
users?
so for whānau at the moment, we're not likely to see significant shift. The calibration, although the new entities, the Health New Zealand and the Māori Health Authority, actually come into force from the 1st of July, the indications coming from the CEOs in Kaimahi, there was a hui held by the presentation had done locally by the Māori Health Authority earlier, and the indication is that they'll take a transition time of 18 months to 2 years. So the idea is not to kind of create change that it becomes disruptive. So there'll be some continuity, but what we will see, what should be visible in that time, is an increasing awareness of either what's going to happen, or we may in fact start to see more services that are available and provided to our.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Now, we'll talk about this later on, but again, taking a look at the COVID response, how's that been within Ngā Tiruanui, within Ngā Ruahine, Areroponaki, around the coastal area, and also here in New Plymouth and Waitara?
Yeah, look, it's we've done, we've done some really good work. I think we've been able to reach whānau that we've not been able to reach in a way that we have done before. So look, the takeaway story is that we were able to achieve levels of vaccination level rates that we've never achieved before in our history. And so that was the result of a collaborative effort. We were clear, we had a common purpose. We knew what we had to do, and it had to be a we conversation. It was something that we couldn't do in isolation. I think a significant introduction, the significant new role of Te Aranga coming in and bringing community people into our work and working in collaboration with those communities meant we were able to have a greater reach than we have ever done before. And the system had to let go to allow us to do that. So resources got to the people that needed it. Of course, since then, things have stalled.
Yes.
And so we aren't getting the kind of traction that we had back then. And there are concerns. There obviously we already had a low level of participation, if you like, or a lower level. We know that in terms of going to GPs, only about 78% of our population of Māori are enrolled with the general practice, which is quite low compared to the rest of the population. And I think that's partly because of low trust. And I think the challenge of COVID has been that's increased the concerns of people and organisations or government, anybody in authority, I suppose, to a certain degree. There's been a loss of trust in some of our communities, which we're going to have to find ways of rebuilding, and that's unfortunately an outcome of this. So on the one hand, there's a really good story. We've seen the system open up, but on the other hand, there's been concern, and part of that, of course, is about the quality of the information that people are looking at. And a big part of our campaign was to try and put in front of people information that gave a balance, if you like, to the story of the vaccination approach.
Okay, so basically, and I've heard it too that it's really hard to get into the doctors. It's losing faith, um, and I think with the COVID response, I think it's COVID fatigue. And you're right about how do we get that back up again, and to remind people that you still have to be careful out there, but. Uh, with all the initiatives that you've got in place and you're planning to put in place in terms of the health reforms, tēnā koe, Haydon. Look, I want to come back to your 25 years, and I can remember Uncle Rocky Hudson talking about you. We were in Palmerston, and he was going back to the days of when he was working with the health system. He was part of the health system, and he spoke about you, and he spoke in good and kindness too, by the way, and also. I look at the likes of, oh my gosh, even Kei Warewario, but many of them that have helped you along the way. How's that? How have you taken on their advice or their kōrero, what they've talked to you about? Ngā kauaroha, I think that's what it's called, or it is what it's called. But how do you carry that through? We always say to ourselves that mahi a ngā mahi o ngā tūpuna, ngā taonga I waihotia mai. Haydon?
Yeah, look, yes, I remember working very fondly with Rocky, and he was very much at the early stages of the Hauora, Jenny and Taranaki, and the likes of alongside the likes of Dr. Tony Ruakere.
Yes.
There's my mum in there. There's many.
Yes.
There's Timu. Look, Nero White. There were. I will probably forget, but I think one of the early lessons in my life, and we will all know this, you listen to your aunties. You call them peril. And I think that's been a bit of a discipline that's been put on Tui Ora as well. The expectations are always higher than what we will always be able to achieve, and so. Organisation that is technically owned by iwi, not directly but indirectly through Te Wharepunanga Kōrero being an appointer of the shareholders of Tui Ora. It's a discipline that we've kept on the organisation for the 25 years, and it does bring perspective. You know that at the end of the day, we know that at the end of the day, unless you have those connections and you're hearing directly back from the communities you're working with and for, then you can run astray a bit. But I think I've always felt personally comfortable in this with this kind of accountability. It's not for everybody's cup of tea, but it is just the way we are, just the way we work, and understanding that's in the DNA of working for, with whānau, iwi, hapu. That's it. One of the challenges I would say with going with that is that we are a pan-tribal structure, and that is always not directly, and we never claimed to be that. Sometimes that wasn't always clear in the way we may have come across, but certainly that was one of the early lessons. It's a very different arrangement when we're a pan-tribal organisation, and we can't assume that what works here in North Taranaki or on the coast is going to be the same as it happens in
Kia ora.
Understanding those really important.
As long as they understand it, those that live down there, they understand their way of living and how their people roll. But koera te mea nui. But 35 services and programs, Haydon.
Yeah.
Tell us about it. Man, the biggest in the region.
Yeah, you can. You can use that term, but what does it mean? It was interesting. I did a interview last week following my announcement, and they said, "Oh, how long have you been around? We've just noticed you in the last."
Oh my God!
Really? We're actually we've been around for longer than that, and it's really because of COVID that we got another level of exposure. But I think we were comfortable in that place, just because we were a reasonably large footprint. We didn't need to go out and get profile. We had profile at different levels within communities, and it goes back to that first point that I made, that although we've got to reach across Taranaki, we have a different level of engagement across different communities depending on where we are. So, but we were comfortable in our skin being immersed at the community level and not necessarily having a high profile across the Taranaki region. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question there.
No, you are. Kei te pai. Kei te pai. Kei te pai, tēnā koe. I suppose, what I know I'm going to be talking to you before you stand down next year, so that's for sure. But at this moment in time, on behalf of Te Korimako o Taranaki, on behalf of Tipene as well, now he has been the advocate for Te Ware Pūnanga kōrero that we have on our show, or on our station once a week, every Wednesday. So from him, from Tipene, koia anei tāna, te mihi atu ki a koe, me te whai wā mana ke te kōrero atu ki koutou, o Tui Ora, ngā ratonga haura Māori, koia tēnā. But Haydon, it's been wonderful catching up with you. I think we've caught up with the COVID response, health reforms. We'll see how that goes when I have another kōrero with you again later on through the year. But please enjoy the celebrations that we've got going on for Puanga and Matariki. It is a time of celebration, and you can get out there and go and surf and do what you need to do with your whānau and have that kind time, waiata time. Koia tēnā, nō reira mihi kawana ki a koe, e Haydon. Tēnā koe, I'm going to leave the last words to you.
Well, kia ora, Diane. Thank you, and absolutely a good note. With the timing of the announcement was no coincidence with Puanga Matariki acknowledging the past, but opportunities for a fresh start as well. So it just seemed appropriate. So on that basis, ngā mihi o te wā. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe. Stay there. I'll be back with you soon. Nō reira mihi kawana ki a koutou katoa, e aku nui, e aku rahi. E wakarongo maina, e mā takitaki mai ai kia māua, ko tō tātou nei wanaunga, manuhiri, ko Haydon Wano CEO for Tui Ora, he wanaunga. Koia tēnā, nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.